Now, success should be based on what you know, not who you know. But too often in the world of work experience, that's just not the case. Today, the Deputy Prime Minister said he was determined to change all that and make sure that ability and drive should trump connections and privilege. Nick Clegg, who's admitted getting work placements himself through family contacts, announced that 100 companies, including big banks and supermarkets, had signed up to what he called a business compact. So they've agreed to advertise work experience opportunities and pay interns some expenses and accommodation costs at least. But does unpaid work actually benefit young people? Well, earlier I took 2 interns to meet Mr. Clegg so they could tell him firsthand just what they'd been through. Mark Scully got a train at 5:15 this morning from Liverpool so he could be here to quiz the Deputy Prime Minister. It's the kind of drive the 23-year-old hopes will land him paid work as a journalist. He's currently doing work experience at the Sunderland Echo and loving it. But Nurhan Awan, a 25-year-old graphic design graduate, is a bit disheartened. She's done 4 unpaid placements and is starting to despair of getting a proper job. Will today's announcement give her hope for the future? Nick Clegg, a few months back you were talking about minimum wage for interns. Now there's this very vague business compact where firms, if they want to, can give the odd bit of financial support. You're no longer talking about the minimum wage, and in a sense this compact really isn't worth the paper it's written on, is it?
If you do an internship and you're basically doing a full day's job, you're basically doing something that not someone would normally be paid for a 9 to 5 job, then actually the legislation is pretty clear. Then you should be paid the national minimum wage. I think you need to be relatively flexible about it, but I think what is not on and what is not acceptable is if employers are basically using interns and work experience youngsters to basically do a job that someone would normally be paid for, full time. I don't think that's on. But most employers, and certainly the employers that have signed up to the business compact, they get that, and many of them, if not the vast majority of them, do provide the right kind of support to allow people of all backgrounds to get that first taste of what it's like to be in a working environment.
Hannah, do you think today's enough, today's announcement?
Financial support is what is needed, but I don't think it's enough to just pay for expenses, travel, lunch. You need to be gaining a wage. Some people can't afford the privilege of interning. It's like you have to be living a life of luxury to be getting experience.
I think the danger is if we say that everybody has to be paid basically as if they were doing a full-time job, then unfortunately what employers will do is they just won't take on people on work experience and internships. Right. And then I think it's much more so than, dare I say, in my days, actually having work experience and internships on your CV has become increasingly important to subsequently having a chance of getting a job interview. That's why I'm devoting some real time on this, because I think that's why we need to make it more fair, and it's not just about who you know, it's what you know.
Companies benefit from having the interns, and certainly, I hope I do a good job where I go, and they benefit from that. If I was doing, London's a good example because of the expensive living here and things like that. If I was to come down here, as I said earlier, I would get some support, but I probably would have to take on some kind of part-time job as well to help myself out. What if I was, I'm in a newsroom, say, just sticking to journalism that I'm doing, from say 7 till about 4, and then what do I go and then work in a bar in the evening from 7 till 2, get up and do it all again? And then am I not going to be able to perform as well in the internship because I'm absolutely shattered having to do all that? I think there should be some more security from, that you can take that internship and that you'll be able to fend for yourself.
Did you get some support in your most recent internship?
Travel expenses were paid for. I was lucky in that it was near to my house, so it was easy for me to get to. I didn't really have to, and it was local, so lunch wasn't that expensive. But some people are going into the city to work. Lunch will cost at least a £5. Another problem is that when you're not being paid, you're not respected in the workplace, and that word intern has become like it's kind of a dirty word. Yeah, it's kind of embarrassing to say you're an intern. But isn't that exactly why we need to? I think that's a really important point you make. Isn't that exactly why we need to make sure that if big companies in particular, or indeed governments, I was gobsmacked when I discovered, when we went into government over 18 months ago, there were informal internships just around the corner here in Whitehall, paid for by
by taxpayers, where it was all about who you knew rather than what you know, and that's why we've scrapped those in government so that everyone can have a chance. But
they have gone now, have they? Because they were going to go by 2012.
They've gone. But
interns in your office?
No, I don't have interns in my office. But
no Lib Dem MPs have unpaid interns?
I'm sure Lib Dem MPs do. They work like sort of self-employed small businesses. The Lib Dem headquarters, I'm very pleased to see, has actually signed up to the business compact that we're talking about today. But the points you make about the reputation and whether it's successful and so on, I just think lifts a lid on something that people haven't talked about for a long time. You know, a few years ago, no one bothered to even look at this issue about whether internships were advertised fairly, whether companies were going into schools, whether there was any financial support. And I'm sure there is more that all of us could do, but at least now I think we're moving the debate so that we make the whole system more open, that it's not a kind of closed shop, that it's not just about who you know, and that everyone has a fair chance.